What the hell was that? Come on, Hobb. It's like chapter 2. Chill. Oh, I don't want to ever speak to you again. That's horrific. Hobb. Why? Why? In fantasy, there is a handful of names that you can't go about without hearing. The obvious ones: Robert Jordan, Wheel of Time, Sanderson, we have Tolkien. However, there is one that I have yet to start, that I've been meaning to start for months, that I'm finally going to start. How many times can I say start? And that is the Queen of Fantasy herself, Robin Hobb. I am so hyped for this. Robin Hobb is the author of The Realm of the Elderlings, which is a 16-book mammoth series. However, the good thing is that this series is broken up into trilogies, and I think there's a quartet in there as well. So if you go in treating it as a trilogy to start with, it becomes a lot more manageable. Known for being awful to her characters but having amazing character work, Robin Hobb really is the queen of making people cry. Now this will be a spoiler-filled video because this is a really well-known book. So I'm going to assume most people have read it. Or if you haven't, there's a ton of content out there that is already spoiler-free. So I really want to go in depth with my reading experience of this book. So if you haven't read it, you might want to skip this one and then come back. Hobb time, baby. It's hard to avoid going into a book without a preconceived notion of what it's going to be like. But I would say 90% of the time I'm wrong. However, with this book, this is exactly the setting and the tone that I thought this was going to be. And I'm so happy about it because it's so much fun. This boy running about this stone keep in the snowy winter, the wind rattling the shutters of the keep, and just the very classical tone of it. I'm loving it so much. The writing style is beautiful. I absolutely love Hobb's prose. I didn't realize that this was going to be a framing narrative story. So this is Fitz looking back on his life. So it starts with him writing the history of the Six Duchies, which is this continent. But then he goes into his story from his earliest memory, which is his grandfather handing him into the keep because he doesn't want to keep paying for him when the father, Chivalry, has left the mother on her own to look after Fitz. So Fitz does start off as a very blank slate character, and it is very slow paced with sort of getting to know all this royal family and these other characters that I assume will be very prevalent, like Burek, is that how you pronounce his name? And this budding relationship between Fitz and Burek is really adorable because it's Burek who's taking him in, despite the fact that he doesn't need to. And he's kind of stepping in as this father figure for Chivalry, who has moved away out of the country. I knew this was going to be emotional, but nosy. What the hell was that? It's far too early to hit me with those kind of emotional gut punches. You can't do that in like the end of chapter 2. I was connected. I even kind of knew it was going to happen because I know Fitz has this animal companion wolf called Night Eyes. So as soon as it was clear that he was bonding with this pup called Nosy, I was like, this isn't going to end well. I know this isn't going to end well, but it didn't matter. It still hurt when Burek took Nosy out back and killed Nosy. And it's the way that Fitz felt that pain and felt Nosy die. Oh my god, this sentence here. My sense of Nosy receded as he was carried further and further from me, leaving in its place a desperate loneliness. I whimpered, then howled, clawing at the door and seeking after my contact with him. There was a sudden flash of red pain, and Nosy was gone. As his canine senses deserted me completely, I screamed and cried as any 6-year-old might, and hammered vainly at the thick wood planks. Come on, Hobb. It's like chapter 2. Chill. But we are already seeing this sort of disconnect with Fitz and the world around him because he's shunned by everybody. So the fact that he started bonding with these animals and then that gets taken away from him. The magic system has only really been hinted at so far. We've got the skill and then Fitz bonding with animals. And it sounds like Burek is really concerned of him becoming very animalistic and having sort of a beast's mind if he's bonded with an animal for too long. That seems to be what Burek is worried about, but we don't really know because there's not really been explanations other than Burek's warnings to Fitz. But so far, I am loving this book. This The problem is, this is the type of book that I'm going to be completely sucked into, and it's going to consume my every thought. I can sense it already, and it's great, but... So I am very, very excited to continue this. Okay, so I'm about halfway through Assassin's Apprentice, and this is the type of book that if you're drawn in by the character and the world and the writing style, then you're fine. But if you're not, then you probably won't enjoy this more day-by-day structure. It's a very slow-paced book, and we don't really see this overarching story that often. I think my guess for the trilogy is to do with these Outlanders, if I'm pronouncing that right, are going to be like the main antagonists. However, they're very standoffish in this book because Fitz is so young and he's still in the keep and he's kind of just growing up, and we're following him becoming Fitz. That was one thing that I found really interesting with this book, is the way that Hobb writes Fitz. He felt like a very clean slate character. There wasn't really anything to him at the start of the book because he was so young. So I feel like we're actually seeing him become a person, which I think is a really interesting way of doing a coming of age story. We spend a chunk of time with Fitz going through a certain era of his life, and then sometimes we get like this big time skip that jumps to set another part of his life. However, the way it's written, it feels very fluid and like we're just living through the life with Fitz. It doesn't feel like we're very jittery and jumpy between all these bigger time skips. For people who really like the school trope and the school sort of setup, I think they would really enjoy this book. While there's not really a school, he does kind of go through classes and he has teachers and he's learning different things. So I think people who like the school trope would really like this setup of this book. Jumping into more specifics, Shade is so cool. I like Shade. Shade's a really interesting character. When he first appeared, I was worried that he was going to be an antagonist or someone who's not really meant to be doing what he's doing. However, once we found out he is with the king, you're like, okay, he's fine. But this is kind of where the name comes in, Assassin's Apprentice, because Shade is teaching him to become an assassin for the king. The entire sequence where Shade asked him to go against the king, and then Fitz denied, and Shade freaked out, and we had that really, really dark chapter of him just kind of laying about in this depression, and it was one of the most real depictions of depression that I've read in a book. It was really well done, but horrific to read. And that ending when Shade comes back down and hugs him and tells him, it's fine, what you did was right. Oh boy. Hobb does a really good job of capturing people, especially with now that I've just got into the part with Lady Patience, which is his kind of stepmom, I guess. And this guilt with her character, that she feels bad about leaving Fitz, and the fact that the fool then said, oh, by the way, she didn't want to leave you. It was Chivalry who said, it's a bad idea for him as well as us to bring him here. It would just make him a target. The way Lady Patience just freaked out when he was so grateful about the puppy that he started drawing it, it was just really well done as an interesting character study. Because Lady Patience is just a side character. She is just not really a main point of view in the story from what I've seen so far. So to have such depth to her character in such a short period of time built up is so impressive. I can see why Hobb is known for her character work, because I feel like every character we meet, we immediately know them as an individual and know them as a person, and they have a level of depth that we just don't get in some other main characters, much less side characters. Even this one that's coming up, Galen, who's going to start teaching him the skill. I've not even met Galen yet, but I still know what to expect from him just by how other characters have reacted to him, mainly Burek talking about him, but also Shade. And because I know what they're like and what they would go against, it's already started to create this picture of this Galen before we've even met him. I feel like I should be more critical with this because I can see why it doesn't work for a lot of people. This whole very episodic nature, this covering a lot of period of time, this not having a main antagonist, or we do have kind of a main antagonist, but it's very much in the backseat of the story currently. It shouldn't have the same feeling of progression that it does, but because Fitz is changing so much as a person, he is growing up to become Fitz. Because, like I said, we do start with a very blank slate at the start of this book, and the writing is so well done that I feel completely immersed when I'm reading this book, and I don't want to stop. And every time I've stopped reading it, I just keep on thinking about it throughout the day. I went into this with tempered expectations because I know a lot of people say this first one's probably the weakest. So if it only goes up from here, this is going to definitely become a favorite series of all time because I'm really enjoying this book. I forgot to mention, Lady Patience giving Fitz another puppy, and it's not called Night Eyes. I swear, if she kills this one too, I'm going to riot. You can't kill 2 animal companions in a 400-page book. That's not acceptable. Even killing 1 in any book is unacceptable, but to kill 2? I swear. That's all I'm saying. Hobb. And running in that snow definitely felt like I was training with Galen, which funnily enough is exactly the part of the book that I am at currently. Currently, Fitz is learning more about the skill from Galen. And that scene at the end, on top of the tower, when he was thinking about throwing himself off it, this book really is just depression in a fantasy story. It's really heavy. While Galen was kind of the main focus with Fitz learning the skill, I feel like this section was a really good example of Burek just as a character. He can be very standoffish. He makes some questionable decisions with raising Fitz. However, he's always there for him when he truly needs him. In my eyes, Burek is the perfect example of a morally grey character. When people talk about morally grey characters, often we think of an antagonist who is doing really bad things, but they're doing it for semi-good reasons or reasons you can understand, or perhaps a protagonist even that's doing some questionable things, but you can see where the thought process got them to that place. Someone who's not necessarily good or evil, but usually they are swaying towards the evil when we talk about morally grey characters. However, I think Burek is the perfect example of a normal morally grey character, because he's very much a soldier. He is a stableman. He's not really cut out to be raising Fitz as a child. He's raising him like he would a pup or a horse. And he does do some questionable things. You think you shouldn't really be pulling back from Fitz right now. He really needs this sort of leading hand in his life. But it also perfectly makes sense for Burek as a character to be doing this. And I think overall he is a very positive impact in Fitz's life. And I think he's just a really interesting and great character, and you can see why he is doing what he is doing, even if you don't necessarily agree with all that he's doing. But he's not really cut out for this. He didn't want a kid. But that whole sequence at the witness stones that we found out through the Fool, where Burek actually went out of his way and dragged Galen to these witness stones and then basically beat him half to death just so Fitz could get another chance, and didn't tell Fitz about it, just speaks to how good a character he really is, especially for Fitz. But I really like him as a character. I think he's good. I don't agree with some of the pulling back that he does from Fitz, but I completely understand it. And while we're talking about the Fool, I like the Fool. He's such a strange character. And I'm wondering if he will be left as this more mysterious character that we don't ever get a backstory for, or if we will get more of his backstory. I'd be really interested to learn more about where he came from, why the way he is. And I like that he kind of has this almost prophetic way he speaks, or he tells things to Fitz about things that might be coming up.
10 minutes later.
What did I say? What did I specifically say? I said you can't kill 2 animal companions. Smithy! Why? Why? The worst part is I knew. I knew because his animal companion in later books is called Night Eyes. I knew it had to happen, but come on, Hobb, stop. And Burek, I take back everything. I hate Burek. He's awful. Oh no. To recap, we're with Galen. He sent out his students into the middle of nowhere to test them if they have the skill, because he's going to reach out to them with the skill. And of course, he drops Fitz right beside Forge, where we have the forged things that used to be people, which I have a theory about that we'll get to in a minute. But first, of course, he has a dream from the eyes of Smithy, and Burek is attacked. Smithy is killed, and then he gets home, and Burek's like, oh, you're still doing the wit thing? Oh, I don't want to ever speak to you again. And he failed the test, the Galen set, and then Shade's disappointed in him, and then he went down into the city and he saw Molly with, what was his name, Jade? Or some guy. So now he has nobody. That was a rough chapter. That was probably one of the best chapters I've read in the book so far, though. But in the worst way, and I hate it, and I hate Hobb, and Smithy! Why? And people were saying that I should be worried if this book's affecting me, because the other ones are even worse. How could they be worse? Hobb's really good at just building everything up, then ripping it away from Fitz. And it's not nice. Which makes me believe only Hobb would create something like forging that they've painted as worse than dying. Something that then affects the person and rips out their whole being in person, but leaves their body as this husk of what they used to be to haunt the people who are still alive. That's horrific, Hobb. And they are clearly part of this bigger plot with the Red Ship Raiders and this more political overstory that we're getting bits of in this first book, but I assume it won't be resolved in this first book. But my theory is Molly is going to get forged, because that would just be horrific. And if something's horrific, Hobb's probably going to do it. That test chapter was so rough. Okay, so I finished Assassin's Apprentice. 100% done. And the ending was really good. The ending was great. We got to go into the Mountain Kingdom, do some travelling around the world of the Six Duchies, as most of it takes place in Buck Keep. So it was interesting to see another place and learn a bit about their culture and how different it is from the culture in Buck Keep. The travel section was a little slow, but it didn't bother me too much because it was just a short part of this last section. And then once we got into this Mountain Kingdom and this final act of the story, it was really good. Because the one thing about this book is it's called Assassin's Apprentice, and I can see how some people could go into this book expecting it to be something it's not. You won't find Fitz crawling around rooftops and jumping down and slitting people's throats. This is not that type of assassin. This is a much more political type of assassin, where it's secret ways to poison people and learn information about the political sphere. But because of that, it's kind of hard to keep tension up, because there's not really lots of action sequences. There's not a lot of battles. So I was curious to see how she was going to end this. And it's with this sort of political poisoning mystery with lots of these little twists and flip things on their head. The poisoner, Fitz, is going in to kill this prince, but then it turns out that the prince isn't sick like they originally thought, and then they knew that he was a poisoner and they were trying to poison him. And Regal was the antagonist of this section, which wasn't too much of a surprise because he is painted as this terrible person, so it made the most sense. But Nosy, only Hobb can kill an animal companion, kill another animal companion, bring back the first animal companion, and then kill off the animal companion again. What? How is that allowed? Surely the publisher or someone went, no, you can't do that. There's rules to these things, Hobb. Clearly no one told her the rules because she broke them all. And somehow, even just Nosy being alive was an emotional gut punch. I was like, Nosy's alive? That hit me right in the heart. And then Nosy ended up dying again. That sequence of Fitz in the pool and he's searching out using his powers, but he starts fading and he isn't able to warn Verity. Then he had this sudden surge of strength. I was convinced it was Burek, but I didn't think Burek was going to die in the first book, so I was hopeful. I was like, okay, we're okay. And then when it turned out that Nosy was lying against him dead because Nosy gave him the last of his strength, Nosy's the hero of the story. Fitz was just there. Nosy is the Sam if Fitz is Frodo. And how complicated the relationship between Burek and Fitz was really interesting, especially towards the end. There was one line in it where Fitz said something like, "Are you going to help me?" And Burek's like, "I don't know." And I just really like that because it just shows how split he is. He wants to help, he wants to do this, but he's so against the wit. However, we do find out that Burek has the wit as well, which I kind of expected. Because he's so against it, I thought he must have had it in the past. And I'm thinking about Nosy's death now, like the first death, when we thought Nosy died. That sequence felt very black and white. Fitz felt this flash of pain and this disconnect from Nosy. And as we go later in the book, we find out that he's pretty far from his other companion, Smithy, but he still feels the connection. So it's not a distance thing that broke his connection to Nosy. So Burek must have the ability to sever connections. I have this theory that Burek was once connected to an animal and became this sort of more animalistic being that he's worried that Fitz is going to turn into. But I'm guessing chivalry was the one that pulled him away from it and brought him back to becoming a person again. That just makes sense to why he's so loyal to chivalry. It makes sense to why he's worried about Fitz falling into this and he's so against the wit, because he was once there, he was once in that situation. And he's especially worried because this is chivalry's son. So that's my theory. We didn't find out in book 1, so I'll be interested to keep reading and find out if that's why he's so against the wit, despite the fact that he also has it. But that's it. I've joined the Trauma Club. I hate it here. 5 stars. I'll certainly keep on reading the Farseer trilogy. I'm probably going to read Royal Assassin in January. And if this video does well and people seem to like this more spoiler-filled format, I will do another video for Royal Assassin. Because I've heard it gets even more traumatic. How? I have no idea. But when I put up that I finished this book on Instagram, I got a lot of messages that said I should be worried. So let me know in the comments below if you want to see that. And also let me know, have you read Hobb? What did you think? But please no spoilers, because I don't want to know. And I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons. Over there are exclusive videos, writing snippets for whatever I'm working on, and you also get to vote for the books that we are reading in the book club. But your support really means the world to me. Thank you very much for watching. Outro. Or I could just burn them, and then I could save myself all the pain and trauma that's going to come. That's also an option instead of reading them.